Morning, everyone. Call to order the Spokane County Planning Commission. Today is Thursday, April 25th, 9 a.m. Brief announcement: the public may participate in person or remotely by utilizing our web link and telephone conference links, *9 to raise hand, *6 to speak. Individuals are limited to 1 3-minute comment period for any item. Please keep your comments specific to the correct agenda item. Chat is not supported. I'd like to have the commissioners introduce themselves in order, and then we'll hear from the general public. Lonnie Edwards.
Logan Calvary,
Wayne Roll
Wyatt Hossing, Pete Rayner.
Stephen Fulton. Thank you everyone for attending today. The first item of business is we refer to as the public comment on any item that is not on this agenda today. So on this agenda, but this is the time that citizens come and address whatever problem they wish to prevent. Everybody do that as the audience or online. Seeing none, let's go ahead and continue the public hearing on the Spokane County Comprehensive Plan 2026 periodic update, specifically the public participation program. Scott.
Mr. Chairman, Commission, good morning. This is, as
Can you turn off your mics so the echo? Everybody, okay.
For those listening, we're having some technical issues with our audio, so please bear with us. If you are having trouble, it can send an email to our staff. That would be great, but we'll do the best we can. Anyway, we are here to continue talking about our public participation program. You've seen that before. We are welcoming any additional comment from today's testimony or up to today. We will be compiling that document into a final draft form that will be posted later today or tomorrow morning. Try to respect our 21-day advance deadline, and it will come back to you to have a final, or to continue the public hearing, close the public hearing, and make a recommendation on at your May 16th meeting. We've got a copy of the document we could bring up. I can show you just a few of the changes that have been made. It's been posted on our web in its most recent form, notably in what we call a red line version, or at least changes version. And trying to do this without making everybody seasick as we go through the document. But for example, we have added some details on different groups, and notably in making it clear about remote participation, making it longer there. You'll see throughout many of the documents that we have moved things from the county should or may do these things into the we will do these or shall do these things. And also adding, weeds here. Adding how we're going to be measuring things, the notification that we'll be bringing in professional communications and public relations staff to help manage and shepherd this through our process. So we've got that skill coming on board. So we've incorporated a number of the things that we've already heard from the public and from these comments into the current draft, and we'll be looking forward to bringing that back to you in May. So we're happy to take any further comments, Mr. Chairman, that the public may have today.
Welcome. Anyone in the audience, that would be a time to come forward.
Toby Willis has his hand raised.
Hand up.
Hello, everyone. My name is Toby Willis. I live at 21908 West McFarlane Road. Can you guys hear me okay? There seems to be some audio problems coming from the your end.
We hear you.
Okay, fantastic. I'm concerned about what the plans are for the lead cleanup.
Yeah, that's during the workshop.
Oh, are you talking about the a potential gun range issue?
Yes, yes.
Okay, that is a later agenda item. Right now, we're talking about the comprehensive plan, public participation. If you could hold your comment until that comes up, we'd appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No worries.
That's one of that sheet of the public participation part of our plan. Understand?
I just have one question, Scott. I was trying to find where this is not on our website. Is it just, is the recommended version on the website?
Yes, yes.
Is there any documents in there, or where is that?
It should be under the Plan Commission's current issues and also in the comprehensive plan page under public participation.
CTA 012024. So text amendment that would allow for small scale slaughtering and the meat processing operations in certain rural zones of Spokane County. This would amend the current language related to slaughtering operations in the zoning code, which only allows in heavy industrial areas.
Mr. Chairman, Commission, you have seen this before. We are here today for more public comment. We talked about how our text amendments are done, the 6 criteria by which they must be evaluated, considered, and then specifically, this would be the small scale USDA slaughterhouse. And as we've evaluated it before, the USDA criteria was recommended to us by the public and others because it provides for retail sale, whereas the state overseen slaughterhouse does not. So this would allow this use in our large and small tract ag, as well as rural traditional and the rural activity centers. And the conditions that you had seen before are, it would be a conditional use in all of those areas, which would have at least these conditions, plus those that a hearing examiner may impose on a case-by-case basis. We had talked earlier about the scale of this and not wanting to have Hormel or Cargill in our backyard necessarily. And the solution, and it was recommended again by our public comment, was to simply say that you could not have this accompanied by a feedlot or overnight storage of animals, and that would keep the scale at a manageable level. And so we've incorporated that change into the criteria. And we have slightly different criteria for the rural lands versus the resource lands, but essentially the same. And so where we are today with this public hearing, we will be asking for your recommendation to initiate this. And again, this is not approval of the actual zoning code, it's to initiate it for further study. What you've seen so far is actually pretty detailed work on the upfront side, but if it's initiated, we will dig into this and decide or make recommendations as to whether or not more stringent conditions should be done or anything else that comes through that analysis. And then this will come back to you for approval later if the board agrees with you to initiate. So with that, we're welcome to take any further comments you may seek, and then it's up to you to deliberate and make recommendations.
Oh, I'd like to speak on this. Or have it.
Question.
Yes.
Have we notified or are we working with the state inspection office on this change of that we're looking at the changes?
I've had conversations with the state when we were anticipating this being a state regulated operation. And then when it was requested to go to the USDA side, there was no follow-up with them after that. We simply talked to the U.S. Department of Agriculture on what those criteria might be and whether they could in fact serve this. And they were affirmative that they would.
So we have reached out to them and they've been notified of what we're
Yes.
talking about.
Yes.
I have a question procedurally. I didn't connect the dots and understand that we're only proposing this to be accepted, to be incorporated into our comp amendments for this year. Is that correct?
Sort of. It doesn't follow precisely the same path that the comp plan amendments do, but we are doing a similar process of initiating your recommendation to the board. The board will formally initiate this. We will further study and bring it back to you for a further public hearing for action. It will very likely come before you much faster than the comp plan amendments. It doesn't have to be tied into that cycle.
My concern is I've done just enough homework to just kind of pique my curiosity to err on the side of caution about putting restrictions on this. Going to Cheney is like going to the moon, trying to go from what we're proposing to Cargill. And to be afraid of Cargill and use that as an excuse to put a limit on what could happen here that's an agricultural use in an agricultural zone, to me seems short-sighted. So I just, if somebody's working in the slaughterhouse and they get hurt and they can't process the cow, they can't feed it. I mean, it just, or the economies of being able to keep cattle for a few days. I don't know enough about it, but I hate to see this thing not happen because we put a restriction on it that has nothing good can come of it, but that's my concern.
Commissioner, that's a fair criticism. And in the case of an extraordinary event, we have the ability to administratively review a policy, or for example, not if somebody needed to keep cattle for a couple of days on an ad hoc basis. It may be a code violation, but it would be one that we could choose to not enforce, for example.
This game a long time, and why kill a goose that isn't going to do any damage? That's my concern. And I just think I'd like us to consider that before we kill that goose.
And perhaps something that the board or the commission might consider is on that I don't remember which one it was, but the condition that said it can't be accompanied by a feedlot or overnight storage. Perhaps the group's consensus would be to drop the overnight storage and simply leave the feedlot as sort of undefined.
And I just want to stress this, we're just an issue. So it's like an opportunity for staff to go back, review more, eventually take more public comment. We're just at sort of the same phase. I know it's not the same as the comp plan amendment, but we're at the same phase as the initiation as when we initiated our comp plan amendments for this year.
That's correct.
Understanding now, I'm ready to move forward with it.
Let me just call one more time. General opinion of the initiative.
Post public hearing.
The initiation would be to continue with further study. That's right. That's what.
So the motion would essentially be to recommend that the Board of County Commissioners initiate this zoning text amendment for further study.
Go to public testimony. Okay. Public testimony without objection is closed. And where do we go? Logan, do you want to make a motion?
Wayne did, and
Which you gave us,
that's a we've got it. Mr. Brokaw made the motion. Mr. Rayner seconded.
Very good. Discussion on the motion. Seeing no discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed by saying nay.
On that subject, when do you think we would expect to have this come back to us, after the commission has to make another action?
Yes, we have scheduled this for briefing the Board of County Commissioners next Tuesday on the 30th. They will then receive your recommendation the week after that, and they will consider it the week after that. I would think we would also then take at least 30 days or maybe 6 weeks to keep taking public testimony and talk to people about how this would go. And so I would expect you would see this in July.
Thank you.
Next order of business, workshop.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are before you again today with what's called the Active Transportation Plan. You saw this in a previous life when it was called the Bike and Pedestrian Master Plans. The nomenclature has changed because GMA, the act has changed to reclassify this as a more holistic effort rather than the two separate ones. Jamie Hayes, planner with our transportation group, has shepherded this project, and she will walk you through the document.
All right, good morning, Planning Commission. My name is Jamie Hayes. I'm the Senior Project Manager for the Public Works Department. As part of the Senior Project Manager position, I am a transportation planner. I do a lot of grant writing. I'm here to present the Spokane County Active Transportation Master Plan to you again. Let me go back to the slide.
1 second here.
Turn it off.
No, that's right. Just screen.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you. No.
Just scroll.
I can't.
Hit cancel.
There we go. Thanks for bearing with me. At this time, this is informational, and the requested action for approval will be at your next meeting, May 16th, for approval of the Active Transportation Master Plan. This presentation and discussion should be considered part of the public review and comment process. And as Scott had mentioned, I had been before you about 9 months ago presenting the Pedestrian Master Plan and the Active Transportation Master Plan. You had approved it. There didn't seem to be any issues, but July 23rd of 2023, House Bill 1181 passed under the title of Climate Change and Planning. And what that did is that basically made the Pedestrian Master Plan and Bicycle Master Plan title obsolete, where they would like to make the change of to an Active Transportation Master Plan. In an effort to be proactive, I went ahead and I consolidated both of the plans, retitled it as Active Transportation Master Plan, and this will go into effect January 2026. And so why do we adopt master planning documents? They provide a way to organize future improvements. They document current system conditions through data analysis. They identify the need for improvements, prioritize improvements, they measure progress, and this is a substantial way to obtain road improvement funding. And it should be noted that encouraging multimodal transportation systems is goal number 3 under the Growth Management Act. This is just a snippet of some of the grants that I work on requesting this kind of documentation to be approved through Spokane County. I was just working on a pedestrian and bicycle grants the other day. This is also asking for it. And when I work on the Safe Routes to School grant, it will also be asking if we have these adopted plans. They're not a part of this, so it just shows you how many grants that I work on that are asking for this kind of documentation to be approved. The Active Transportation Master Plan is intended to be a guiding document of all the policies for the improvement and increased connectivity of active transportation within Spokane County. It increases active transportation infrastructure, improves safety, and provides a good funding opportunity. This plan is intended to facilitate policy and project implementation in an urban and semi-urban environment where it benefits people and complements pedestrian generating land uses. Like all projects, context sensitivity creates quality projects. The goals are really straightforward. The goal number 1 is to improve safety on the active transportation network. Goal number 2 is to provide a connected network of sideways, paths, trails, bicycle lanes that are ADA accessible and encourage multimodal transportation for a variety of users. Goal 3 is to improve the health and livability of county residents by creating an environment that is supportive of active transportation for all ages and ability. And goal number 4 is transportation options. We want to increase those. This is a good moment to point out that 1/3 of our population cannot drive, whether that is because they were too old, too young, they choose not to, they have a disability, or they cannot afford it. So what this really comes down to, besides active transportation, is vulnerable populations and equity as well. And you might wonder, how do we monitor safety? And for that being our number 1 goal, well, we look at crash data and we look at trends. We coordinate with our Target Zero liaison. We identify locations with more than 1 incident, increase cross-agency awareness, and implement countermeasures. We evaluate pedestrian scale lighting at key crossing locations, at uncontrolled intersections, and intersections with a crash history. Lighting is one of the things that's noted on our sheriff's reports when we look at the crash history. It's also an FHWA approved countermeasure. We analyze LTS. LTS is a level of traffic stress. How I like to explain this to people is it's a feeling. So how do you feel when you're walking down your neighborhood on a sidewalk with a swale and your neighbors are driving 20, 25 miles around you? Does it feel comfortable? You feel okay. Comparative to how do you feel when you're walking down the street or riding your bike down the street on a 4-lane section of road where people are driving 35 to 45 miles around you and you can feel the wind of the cars passing you. They have 2 very distinct feelings. And we want to encourage safety education, whether that means the Washington State Transportation Council, Target Zero, Safe Routes to School. And we want to make sure that the active transportation facilities are comfortable for all ages and abilities, for the elderly and the young. If those people can participate on those types of facilities, and it's comfortable for everybody. As part of consolidating these plans, I went ahead and updated any updates that I could. And what I brought to you last time was probably the 2018 to 2022 crash data. Well, I went ahead and updated that, and you can see this is our crash data for pedestrians and bicyclists in Spokane County. There has been an increase in crashes and people getting hurt that have been reported since I last spoke with you. I just opened up an email from the National Highway Safety Transportation Administration the other day, and I was reading through the email, and it said that nationally, people in driving cars, those crashes have been reduced, but pedestrian and bicyclists have they're at an all-time high for a 4-year high of it being involved in crashes. So unfortunately, Spokane County has followed the national trend, which makes adopting a program like this even more imperative. Goal number 2 is connectivity. You're going to see this as a common theme throughout this presentation and throughout the document. So what connectivity does is it increases low stress connectivity. So those that LTS that I was talking about, that feels a little bit more safe to walk and participate on. Evaluate the level of low stress facilities around institutional and commercial areas. Prioritize and increase low stress connectivity to places people like to go, pedestrian generators. Evaluate crossings and wayfindings where barriers exist, such as rivers, freeways, and railroads. Those are big examples of barriers. A barrier could be not having something ADA accessible when you need assistance walking down the road, or you're pushing a stroller and you're all of a sudden forced out to be on the street competing with traffic. And then to analyze the network for missing crosswalks and places that inadvertently encourage mid-block crossing. We all know that as you are turning a corner, you slow down. As you go to that straightaway, you tend to speed up. If people are crossing mid-block, that increases the potential for injury when cars are speeding up and you're trying to cross the road. And then filling in those gaps, whether that's bicycle lanes, sidewalks, or paths. And then improve the quality of life, prioritize connectivity and low stress infrastructure again, continue to apply for funding to increase the amount of active transportation infrastructure, lower vehicle miles traveled, and improve air and water quality. And work with agencies within Spokane County to promote and improve health, lower obesity and chronic disease, such as the Spokane Regional Health District. They put out a very good report on demographics within Spokane County. Age, sex, gender, nationalities, and obesity and chronic disease. Continue to support local programs that help support residents on bikes, such as the commute-inspired Northwest Bike swap that they just did last weekend. And then improve transportation choices. Provide a GIS-based active transportation map on the Spokane County website. There's 2 planners at the Spokane Regional Transportation Council right now that are doing this. They've collected data from Spokane County and the other jurisdictions to provide a regional level of traffic stress map for everyone to use. And what that can do is that you can go onto the map and you can look at least resistance, so to speak. How are you going to get from point A to point B with the least amount of traffic stress? Reduce gaps in the network, increase and improve access to wayfinding to places that people want to go, whether that is jobs or for recreation, and work on implementing corridor projects adjacent to busy arterials as an alternative to high-speed, high-volume roads, and help make those first last mile connections for transit. Here's an example of active transportation facilities that need some help. You can see that on the southern side of this, that the sidewalk's completely missing curb. There's all kinds of mixed materials there that may not be ideal for someone that needs assistance going down the road, people with strollers, etc. This is a county library, and then just a little bit to the west, there's an elementary school. It's surrounded by residential. I believe there's a coffee shop and a gym and a hardware shop not too far away as well. And this is a bike lane. This is an interesting scenario because this is a one-way road that just divides into 2, as you can see. Now all of a sudden it's 2 lanes, and then it drops the bicycle lane completely right into the mix of those 2 lanes opening up. We all know people get impatient on one-lane roads, and so sometimes people get a little impatient and want to go around, and so that bike lane is dropping bicyclists off right in the mix of all of that. The good news is that we just had a road project funded, and what we're going to do is we're going to extend that bike lane to the sidewalk for it's about 200 feet roughly, so that there's a designated space for bicyclists to ride their bike. And so it's also a visual indicator to drivers that this is a designated space for bicyclists. And then I wanted to talk about public engagement. Surveys were created and distributed for both plans, the bicycle master plan and the pedestrian master plan. There was almost 500 responses for the bicycle plan and over 100 for the pedestrian plan, for a total of over 600 responses. I've been with the county for almost 5 years now. I've worked on a lot of projects. I've worked with consultants, and they have people that specifically, that is their one and only job, is to do public engagement. I've never seen numbers like this before. We're really rapid in responses. I think the last woman working on public engagement, she had 260 responses for a pretty well-known transit project that we're working on regionally. I think this is a testament to how much people care about this plan, the support for this plan, and also to our neighboring jurisdictions that help get the word out for this. I also wanted to let you guys know that I've attended a bike swap. I went out to the public, I met with them, on their territory, engaged them. I've been invited to present at organizations and clubs. This month, because they are curious about what the status of this plan is and what projects we're working on. So this isn't just a box that was checked. Here's a survey, fill it out, I'm done with you. This has been ongoing relationship building and interaction with the people that really care about this. And I wanted to show you some good examples of what can happen. This is a really interesting area because this is a transition zone. We're in between 2 really busy roads, high speed, high volume roads. And what this does is this is showing you that, hey, you need to slow down. This place is not just for cars only anymore. And it really brings a lot of awareness to the mixed use of people that could be using this transportation system. We have a sidewalk with a buffer. We have a designated bicycle lane that indicates the presence of bicyclists here with a buffer. We have a speed limit sign and a speed feedback sign right here. I also want to point out that the fire hydrant is not acting as a barrier. It's not in the way of that public facility. So this is what good planning and good engineering can accomplish in the right context-sensitive zone. And here, you can't really see the RFB, but an RFB is a rectangular rapid flashing beacon. What that does is when it's activated, it flashes, it lights up, it tells people to slow down or to stop because this is a pedestrian designated zone. Why this is important is because you can see the level of traffic in this area. and it's 4 lanes. It's quite a bit of road to cover at that point. Why this is additionally important is that this area is surrounded by residential, and there's a middle school right across the road. So instead of these kids, because they're not going to get bused when they live right across the street, instead of these kids having to compete with that, it was decided that this warrants a good RFP and that they can safely cross at this point, with having drivers really know that it's a space for them to cross safely. And then with all the support we received, there was a concerned citizen that brought up the fact that the trails aren't addressed in this plan. And I can understand the confusion on this because trails and pathways are synonymous with each other and interchangeable. Looking at Bill 1181 that just passed July 23rd of last year, that kind of put this plan on hold and to be another iteration of it. It takes you to the definition of trails, and I want to read that for you. And then it's RCW 47.30.005 says, for the purpose of this chapter, trail or path means a public way constructed primarily for and open to pedestrians, equestrians, or bicyclists, or any combination thereof, other than a sidewalk constructed as part of a city street or county road for exclusive use of pedestrians. Well, I want to reassure you that in the plan, their class 1 facilities are separated pathways or pathways with that are not sidewalks designated for the use of active transportation. The amount of miles are in there, the locations, the names of them, and they're located on a map. They're extensively talked about. And also, just to cover all the bases here, I went ahead and included the Parks Department's Trails and Parks facility, just in case there is some kind of transportation related connection between dirt paths as well as our standard transportation system that we use. And then a rural component was brought up. And I think that it's to be noted that this isn't intended for farmland and rural use and 40-acre lot type of land use. This is intended for pedestrian generated semi-urban, urban land use. So we can make those connections where people need to travel, get to work, get to the dentist, whatever. And it connects into other jurisdictions' facilities as well to make a holistic facility is the long-term goal. And I just perused the document and I just put down pages where it talks about context sensitivity, that this is not intended necessarily to be a rural document for rural use. And then public engagement was criticized that there wasn't enough. And as much as I would like to get 100% participation and knock on everyone's door and call everyone, maybe people don't even necessarily want that. But I wanted to just, go back and remind you that the public participation on my part has been ongoing throughout the year.
Got a question for you.
You bet.
You use the word means a public way.
Mm-hmm.
How does that fit into trails that are included in subdivisions?
Well, that would be a public way. It's in the right of way.
No, but these aren't in the right of way.
Well, then if it's like on someone's private property, I don't think that we construct anything like that on someone's private property. Any facilities that the county is going to construct would be within the right of way.
I'm just curious as to if we're going to be encouraging trails, that how we deal with trails that come in and out of a subdivision and tie into the Centennial Trail or whatever.
Well, with that would be.
Words we choose.
Oh, and this is a great example of it. Trails, paths, like I said, interacting. And this is from the RCW, from the Revised Code of Washington, not anything that the county picked out or that I chose. And so I can't think of an offhand example necessarily. I'm sure if you gave me some time and if you would like to have a further conversation with me about that, I would be happy to see what I can find, whereas a public facility is meeting up with this, like the Centennial Trail, which is not a county facility necessarily, but it's within the county or within a county like path. But still making that connectivity for the general public is what we're kind of aiming for, not necessarily for private properties. Does that answer the question sufficiently?
I just know that when you're dealing with the parks departments and you propose a trail, they don't want it to be public because they don't want to maintain it. So I mean, if we get conditions that this leads to conditions of riding trails or access to trails, how do we avoid a catch-22? That's all.
Well, I think that I would also like to point out again that this is context sensitive. So we're not going to be promoting trails everywhere. like it would have to be in an appropriate spot with the appropriate support. And not just every design is going to be like this, given a certain context. It will be very specific and very thought out.
Mr. Chairman, if I could interrupt you, what Mr. Rayner is referring to is more of an implementation part of this. Jamie is talking about the master planning part of the comprehensive planning part. And what you're talking about would be something that we would memorialize in the development regulations themselves. So if someone was coming in to propose a subdivision that was perhaps adjacent to the Centennial Trail or to a public trail of some kind, if this body felt inclined to make that recommendation, we could say if it's such size, you must have an internal circulation system that connects to this trail, something like that. But it wouldn't be in the development regulation side, not so much in the upfront planning side.
And then here's my contact information. If you have any questions now, or if you think of any down the road, but I stand for any questions or comments you might have at this moment.
Yeah, just like one, I appreciate the concept of having a GIS map that grades streets based on their level of traffic stress. I'm curious, is that going to be all roads in the county that have that? And currently there's already this Spokane regional bike map produced by SRTC, and I'm wondering if those exist together. Yeah, can you just give me an idea of how that's going to work?
Absolutely, those will exist together, because what they're basically doing is they're taking those bicycle facilities and any designated facilities, and they're rating them. So it's an interesting process. Like I said, I'd be happy to give you that information. And what it is it's a matter of traffic volume, traffic speed, width of the facility, and proximity to all of that's what's going on. And so yeah, Michael Redlinger and Jason Leand from SRTC, which created that map that you're talking about, are heading this project.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll work with Jamie to put that information on that so we can see the detail behind the plan. So
they're not done with it yet, but when it is done, and yes, when they are, but I just want to make sure that that's clear to everyone that they're still working on this. It's actually a fairly complex process to go through, because you have to look at all of the variables and put them together and grade them. But like I said, if you guys are curious about any of the LCN things, or how it was created, or who created it, or what the components of it are, I have all of that information with you, and I'd be happy to share it.
Thank you. I just want to emphasize it's really helpful. If you grade me as a cyclist, I'm like, fearless, whatever.
Yeah, you understand that.
But when I want to take my wife there, I'm just like, and so we have to plan all of this carefully. This is having tools to plan for this.
And I agree with you. I ride my bike to work occasionally, and then when I'm taking my 10-year-old out, that's a whole different ball of wax right there. You got to be a lot more careful when you have little ones or people that aren't as comfortable with it. But I guess the whole point to it is that the more facilities, it's a perceived safety issue as well. So I mean, if you feel safe, you're more likely to participate.
Jamie, thank you. I definitely understand what you're saying, and it does make sense. I'm a little more practical. In my home, I have one budget to work with, and I know within the county we have a complete capital budget to work with. And at our last hearing, we had STA, and I've listened now for almost 20 minutes and never heard you use the word STA in conjunction of working with it.
Well, the first last mile is transit oriented. And the first and last mile that's exactly what that is that is in relationship to transit. So the first last mile is maybe that's an like institutional term, professional term to use, but that's exactly how people get back and forth to transit. It's called the first and last mile, because people aren't going to tend to walk or bike further than that to get somewhere on foot. So I work very closely with STA or transit, just generally speaking as transit, and I have for years.
So I apologize for that. Again, I was trying to look at their budget, your budget, and everyone's at this point. And it was a point that I was after, is that are we duplicating, overlaying some of the things that each division is doing, STA or? I want good money spent in the right direction, and that's all I'm asking
Mr.
for.
President, let me jump in. Maybe just a little bit.
Sure.
Yes, your concern about transit is something that we've reflected on recently, because we talk about it in every one of our comprehensive plans. Close transit agreements. We're meeting with STA tomorrow to sort of reintegrate them as similar to what we call special districts, water districts, fire districts. For some reason, in the recent past, we've left STA on the sidelines. And as and this is tangential to what Jake is talking about, but it's also connected. You will see, in fact, in our staff report, we're going to talk a little bit about it today. One of the GMA requirements is changing on how we allocate housing for our communities in this upcoming plan. We're doing that with an ear toward income levels, but also to proximity to services that starts off with transit services. So our upcoming discussion with STA is to bring them into the comprehensive plan umbrella in a way that they haven't been for at least, so that we can look at, rather than STA planning its routes based on extending existing routes on grant funding and things like that. It's more like, no, we're planning on growth in this area that needs to be transported into development. What will it take to get you out here in the next 5 years, and how we work together to get there? So we're really kind of excited about bringing them into this planning process in a more direct way.
Thank you, Scott. That helped. Hey,
I'd also like to say that vulnerable populations and that equity issue that I brought up is directly related to transit.
I just want the money to be spent in the right direction.
Yeah, and we're not spending money on the master plan. We're trying to provide a guiding document for implementation, potential implementation down the road.
Thank you.
In my area, we have a lot of subdivisions going in schools. So with what you're putting together, as the public comes in and leaves that subdivision with kids wanting to go to that elementary school or junior high, et cetera, is that into the plan that you're working on, is how they would be able to get out of the subdivision onto the main road, get to the schools?
Yeah, and with development, we would hope that the development's contribution would be sidewalks and ADA ramps and stuff like that. So, I mean, that is usually typically a half mile is within the safe routes to school documents that schools develop for how the best way for kids to get to school.
There's no sidewalks, there's no shoulders to speak of on these roads when they come out of these subdivisions at all.
Well, that's exactly what something like this should hopefully facilitate, is improvements there.
The SRTC is involved.
No, not necessarily. They're involved with the LTS, like developing that LTS map for the region.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Well, yeah, 01, 2023. I didn't want to start the.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. We are bringing back for your continued discussion the zoning text amendment for defining a gun club. And at this point, I would invite the representative of the gun club to address you, and I think they have a request for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chesney. I'm Dwight Hume, and I'm here on behalf of the gun club. We're trying, as you know, to get this text amendment changed, but we're not prepared today to make any presentation. What we would like to do is bring to you a public relations representative firm to present the topic of gun clubs. What what I'm discerning is that with good intentions, the responses that we're getting out of this body are not necessarily appropriate for the nature of the use. So I think it's time to pause and hear from some professionals that can explain it. I'm not a shooter, unfortunately, but so I don't know all the details. All we've heard from is exercising our common sense about noise and safety. So with that in mind, I'd like to end this until we can bring that to you. It's possible that we can actually be here in 2 weeks at your next scheduled meeting. In that regard, if possible, to keep this thing moving forward in a timely manner, what I would do is tell Ella or Scott as soon as I can confirm if if they'll be ready. Otherwise, I know we would be ready in 1 month. Okay.
I have one question about it. Do we just ask that this presentation includes some response to the comments that I don't really well articulated in the most recent minutes and maybe from the minutes beforehand, just to sort of address those comments in a way that's meaningful?
I haven't seen those comments. I don't remember what they are. So.
They're draft minutes at the moment. We'll send them out to you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is only a workshop, so there's no public hearing involved. There's no reason to keep a hearing open. The request from the gun club to simply continue the discussion it's certainly easy for us to accommodate, and we can do so. Yet we know there are folks in the audience, so we don't want to prematurely cut off debate and wait for that to happen. So I would encourage you to take any comments from the public today, and then we will continue this as is appropriate.
Do we have any time frame that we are dealing with number of days?
No, at the moment the gun club is if it was a formal request, you would be asked to table this indefinitely, and they will come back to us when they're ready to make a presentation. But we're not asking for a formal motion because there's nothing on the table. Simply saying after today, we will wait to put this on a future agenda until the gun club is ready to make a presentation.
It's the intention of the chair that who will speak. That's your speak. The rules are 3 minutes. So kind of like that. Good morning.
I'm Carol Whitehead. I live at, okay, thank you. I'm Carol Whitehead. I live at 4620 South Ritchie Road, and I just had a few thoughts that I think could make a difference. Historically, the gun club was operated in the valley by land use efforts before anybody really bothered to codify them very much. And they had amenities that kind of evolved over time because of the fact they existed and they were relatively unrestricted. And then they sold the property to the school, and they moved out, or are looking to move out into further out west mostly. And what I kind of think is that there's a mindset that within the gun club that their rights should have been transferable from one property to the other. And that is not the case because that grandfathering situation is not valid in this case. The actual definition, where you talk about gun clubs is supposed to be someplace, or gun ranges, is where you go out and shoot your gun with some friends, you hang out. It's engineered to be safe, and it's engineered to be relatively non-intrusive. Some people enjoy, they have a good time, and then they go home. Well, this thing that they're creating or wanting to create is more of a sports complex when you start adding And it's not just one amenity, it's the amenities stacked on top of each other. This goes from being a social, just a little social club to being a sports complex. And in a sports complex does not belong in a rural traditional zone. And you guys, you know, you've seen that, but it belongs more in something like maybe a large tract agricultural, perhaps, where they wouldn't have a lot of neighbors. But it's one thing to put a piece of something that is this impactful to the neighborhood in a place where there aren't a lot of neighbors. And, you know, there are like 300 or so houses that are pretty directly impacted by, or homes that are directly impacted by the placement. If they were to place it like someplace like the West Plains, like the original plan was. I know you're saying that that is unlikely. But anyway, I just want to make the point that I really think we're kind of looking in the wrong direction about what we're trying to shoehorn this particular set of things that they want into a spot that they don't really belong. And so anyway, I just want to say that. And I think the effort to clarify this description is more about, like I say, trying to make something fit that doesn't. And I would ask that you give that some thought. The other thing is that how one would police, and I don't like that word really, but how one would control the conditions of these kinds of permits and these kinds of amenities, and if they would do that, who's going to do that? Because we haven't had a lot of luck in the past with many things that they, like the sand pit and stuff out there. We can't, no one wants to talk to us, and they haven't for years. And we, you know, I just want, if you're gonna do it right. Thank
I
you.
got a question for me.
Yes.
I wanna speak on what you said. Are you suggesting that in the process of looking at this legislation that deals with gun clubs, that we look beyond the current permitted zones to look at others that might be more appropriate? Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm thinking that is the, really, if they want what they're saying they want to make their operation what they want it to be, I think it needs to be in a different zone. Because at least in the Spokane County, the way it's grown over the last several years is expanded to the point that people are closer, even in those rural traditional zones, you have more density. And that density, you know, is going to be more affected. Now, I know everything has to go somewhere, but it helps if you put it somewhere where you're not going to have as much pushback, and then people can actually create what they want to create without making a bunch of enemies. You know, that's my thought. And there are places around here, I've seen a few, that would fit this very well and be actually a better site. They might be a little spendier for the initial outlay for the property, but it would be, there's infrastructure already in place to not impact a lot of people that are just living on their little dirt roads in the country. So that's my thought. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, well, the next person is coming up. Let me remind the commission, the current site that is owned by the gun club has been through litigation, court decision was rendered. The gun club is not able, legally will not be able to use that site for gun club purposes, regardless of the action of changing the definition of the zoning code. And so just to be clear, this action or this potential action before you is changing a definition in the zoning code text, but it will not change the situation for the gun club's current land. They cannot use that land for gun club use based on the court decision.
Thank you. Whitehead, please. Welcome, 3 minutes.
Oh, wow. Talking into the screen. Minutes. My name is Anthony Whitehead. I live at 22022 West Thorpe Road, Medical Lake, Washington, 90222. So first of all, Mr. Chesney, really quickly, talked about the gun club existing property in the area, very close, 1,000 feet.
and 30 feet from where my father is. So it's very personal to me, but what he said was that they cannot use that property. And in the litigation, there were two codes that made it, basically made it not permissible. One was the military impact that came out of JLUS. And that was the vast majority of it, but then also the rural traditional codes through the county would not permit it. So, but I want you to know that the zones based off of the military impact area had a sound corridor, and it eats up pretty much the entirety of their land, except on the McFarland side. There is still a large tract that is only rural traditional. So they changed this code. They absolutely can put a gun club in. So I just want to clarify. With that, I want to go on to just say I think there were concerns about having facilities to practice, right? People want to learn. And you know, I am a proponent of the Second Amendment. I am an owner of multiple guns. So I support guns, owning guns, practicing with guns, enjoying guns. That isn't the point. I'm not an activist pushing against guns. But I think it does need to be in an appropriate spot, something like this. And it is not appropriate. When the zoning went in, many of the owners in this area were already there. And there were lots the size of a half-an-acre, and there still is. So we're not talking about the 10-acre lot that is currently considered, that is approved in rural traditional. There are about 300 homes within a mile and a half of their property. So there would be a huge impact to the quality of life of those people. And again, the cemetery, it's just unfathomable to me that you can put something like this next to it. I mean, or a church. You know, it's one thing if a church or a cemetery wants to move in, you know, which is unlikely. But if they're already there, you know, we shouldn't be putting something like this in that area. I still want to pursue mitigation regarding the impact of something like this. And I think we need to have at least a mile distance from any cemetery or church or anything like this. I also wanted to say that real quickly, in the comprehensive plan that is on the website, they talked about, I think, 4 different zones. The only one that they have listed as conditional use is the rural traditional. There are 3 other zones that can be used: large tract agricultural, small tract agricultural, and then also forest. And there are huge swaths in this county of that, where there are not communities built. So just consider that, please. Thank you.
Question? Wall riding footage.
Mr. Chairman, one clarification. The definition, if it is changed, will be a conditional use in all of those zones.
And what is it? Is it English use and all those things?
Yeah, for the most part, the difference is the conditions as they're defined now are very minimal.
It would still be conditional use. It is conditional use in small tract ag, large tract forest, it would continue to be.
Correct.
My name is Walt Radmer. I live at 24329 West Fancher Road, Medic Lake. And I'm going to start out by saying, if we have a system that's working right now, using it for say, if it's working, why do we need to change it? And secondly, we try to go this, to put a gun range a camping facility, whatever you want to call it, anywhere near a cemetery, school, or park, and can affect children, families, and so forth. That's just not right. Public safety, I mean, I don't want to beat that to death, but a lot of stuff's already been said that I was thinking about. But one issue that hasn't been discussed is these folks are looking at, and the woman said they've already got a no shooting zone, or they've been told they can't put a gun club out in their area. And that is also farmland. And folks, we need to keep our farmland production. We need to keep our farmland so people can get, you know, their food costs and so forth will stay where it is. We need to also consider all this, these changes. How much farmland are we taking out of production for a single use group? So we need to keep the majority of the people, their concerns, their cares, their issues need to be considered over small groups. And I don't want to say a gun club of 100 people is a small group, but you consider all the people that are affected, not just the Medical Lake Cemetery, but all over the place. So we need to keep the majority of people's concerns in mind. It's sort of been spent, you know, I don't want to beat this gun club thing to death, but you know, it's not just our area, it's all over the county. So we got to keep the whole county's concerns, the majority of the people's concerns in mind when we make decisions like this. And again, if we've got a system that's working and it's not broke, why do we want to change it or fix it? And I have a question. The gentleman said from the gun club that they have professionals coming in to do some information or whatever it is. Look at that. Are we going to be able to hear what that's all about, or is that just for you folks as consideration?
So that'll be the public hearing.
Okay, thank you. Again, a majority of the people is what we got to keep in mind. Safety of our churches, children, and start. Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I'll give another clarification. The speaker brings up a valid point about protecting agricultural use. Ag uses in STA, LTA, particularly, and others that are still maybe in different zones but are part of USDA prime ag soils. Those are highly protected by our own code and by the Growth Management Act. Those resource lands are valued really beyond all else because the obvious once they're gone, they're gone. And so the idea that while this zoning text amendment will allow that use in that zone, to say or to put it in a zone that would de-designate agriculture would be a logistical challenge to the point of probably not feasible. We don't believe we would support that, and we believe the state RCW would prohibit that de-designation of ag lands. So it would have to coexist in some way if it was used in one of those areas. But just to be clear, it would not allow for, say, 40 acres of land to be taken out of agricultural production to put into this use.
Let's pause right here with the other switch that allows someone to come into it too.
Sharon Whitehead.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Sharon. Go ahead.
Great. I'm apologize that I couldn't be there in person. I have a couple of concerns. The first one is a big one, which is you guys are hearing this, but you don't have any staff analysis that seems to be balanced. There are other counties in the state that have these codes. There are other jurisdictions that have them. We seem to be reacting to a proposal, and I'm hearing, frankly, support by the county staff for this recommended change. But I don't see anything that's a balanced analysis for you guys to take into consideration this holistically. And that kind of concerns me. I'm not an expert on building an analysis that would be balanced in terms of residents. And I would go back to say that your current code does everything it needs to do. Reducing it to smaller acreage, expanding its use creates a bigger problem. This is not clarifying. This is expansion. And I don't know that that's appropriate for this county or any other county in the state. So those are my comments for you to consider.
Thank you. Question, so do I understand correctly, this is much like the, ag processing facility, this is the initiation phase, you give an opportunity for staff, or not?
No, the gun club amendment was initiated by the Board of County Commissioners in 2023. So it is under full consideration.
Thank you.
Understand. For the secret earlier.
Mr. Willis, go ahead.
You have the floor.
Hi, my name is Toby Willis. I live at 21908 West McFarland Road, Medic Lake, Washington. And my concerns for the commission is would be to consider the lead contamination that's gonna be a part of the gun club for obvious reasons, and the possible well contamination, and then also the fire concern for the campers and things like that. So I just wanted to come in and give my 2 cents on that. And make sure that those are addressed or thought about.
Thank you. You can get it.
Thank you for allowing me to come back. I made a public comment at the last workshop. My name is Eugene Cada, 18205 East Riverway, Spokane Valley, 99016. I want to express my heartfelt thoughts about the gun club's possible relocation on their 450 acres immediately across from the historic Medical Lake Cemetery on Thorpe Road. A specific issue that you'll probably hear more about from my wife, but the code amendment procedure require the Building and Planning Department to forward a staff report to the commission prior to review by the commission. A public records request response from the county stated that there is no staff report for this proposed text amendment. No staff report has been produced as a part of the present review. Commission should not proceed without the required staff report. If it does, it's not following the simple terms of the code. Public workshops like the present one and any preceding workshops or succeeding workshops shouldn't be happening without the commission first having their necessary staff report. In closing, Mr. Hume from the gun club told me at the last workshop that the Thorpe Road property was for sale. It would not, and the gun club would not be locating there. I am accepting his word, and I want to go on record sharing his statement. Thank you.
My name is Connie Cada, 18205 East Riverway Avenue, Spokane Valley. I'd like to read the county's criteria for amendments 14402 and respond to each one of those 6 items, the guidelines. Item number 1 states the amendment is consistent with or implements the comprehensive plan and is not detrimental to public welfare. These proposed changes, this is my comment, the proposed changes could already, each and every one, be reviewed and politically permitted on their own merit according to a specific site under consideration for a given permit application. To say this request is not for the purpose of making a change for an existing specific site is contradictory to the facts at hand for the Spokane Gun Club and the property they own adjacent to the Medical Lake Cemetery. Item number 2 states, a change in economic, technological, or land use conditions has occurred to warrant modifications of the zoning code. No, this is not the case. There is no change in condition that would warrant the proposed amendment. The Spokane Gun Club has not presented any other than its own specific interest in developing a commercial sports shooting complex, including RV parking, catering, retail, multi-day competitive shooting events. Item number 3 states, an amendment is necessary to correct an error in the zoning code. No, there is no error here in the existing code or language. Nothing from the Spokane Gun Club actually supports any allegation there is an error. Item number 4 states, an amendment is necessary to clarify the meaning or intent of the zoning. No, the current language of the code that Spokane Gun Club is seeking to amend is not lacking in clarity. It is only lacking in providing the Spokane Gun Club what it wants to develop as a part of a sport shooting complex. Item number 5 states, an amendment is necessary to provide for a use that was not previously addressed by the zoning code. No, there are no uses that issue that have not already been addressed. RV parks are previously addressed. Retail is already addressed. Food service kitchens uses are already addressed. Item number 6 states, an amendment is deemed necessary by the commission and or board as being in the public interest. In the public interest, each item, RV parking, retail sales, catering, can all be permitted separately dependent on location rather than a broad change for non-specific sites. None of these expanded and more complex issues are actually needed for our gun range or training and gun safety. Gun safety training does not rely on RV parking. Gun safety training does not rely on catering. Gun ranges do not rely on retail stores. These things being included in the text amendment, expanding and broadening the definition of the gun range is only achieving the interest of the Spokane Gun Club and is actually contrary to public interest. The proposal is not expanding the existing definition. It is also conflating it with other different uses that the code already contemplates for separate review. If a party wants a CUP for catering and food sales, apply for a permit for that use. If a party wants a CUP for RV parking, apply for a permit. If a party wants a CUP for retail sales and store, apply for that permit. These things need to be done on site-specific location, not a blanket approval for all gun and archery ranges. Thank you.
I did have one question for you. So if we have the speaker come in 2 weeks, will we have a chance after his report to comment later on that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, clarifying point one more time. As all of you know from our comprehensive plan amendment cycles, the speaker accurately identified all 6 of the criteria that are required to make a zoning change that we use for the comp plan amendments. But remember, only one of those has to be met for any particular request. It doesn't have to meet all 6. It has to meet one of the 6.
I am Russ Nelson, 22126 West Chisholm Trail Lane. I share the west property line with the property. And my concerns are We have Spokane International Airport, we have Fairchild, we have BNSF, and we have Washington Eastern Railroad, all moving through there. They're all making noise and potential hazardous waste. We've also got the fire foam plume from SIA that we're chasing and from Fairchild. And we want to add lead to that for all our wells. The only answer we're getting from French is that we're going to give you Spokane water. What kind of cost is that? So my concern is the environment and the place we live. And when we get those windows of peace and quiet, they're heaven. But now we're going to take that away with all the gun shooting. So please respect the people that live out there already and give us our peace and quiet that we do have. Thank you.
Well, the yellow slips, but I don't recognize somebody.
Mr. Chairman. While you're doing that, the gentleman brings up a very good point about water. And tangentially, one of the things that we are looking through as part of the comprehensive plan update is called the Coordinated Water System Plan, which details all of the water providers throughout Spokane County, and also to a lesser degree, the number of individual wells and things like that. This is not a plan that will necessarily result in improvements of water, but it will allow us to study where that works, and if there's a deficiency in some way, it'll provide some rationale for perhaps solutions that might affect those people that are affected with the PFAS contamination of West Plains. So the water study is something that we will be doing in the next couple of years as well. And lastly, just to reiterate, the gun club is not legally able to use the parcel they currently own for shooting sports. The court decision is in place, and that is final.
Well, she's in the way. I just want to point out, I understand the issue and the challenges in the West Plains as best as I can, but also I also want to point out that most Spokane wells appear to be, including in the city of Spokane, with waters appear to have PFAS in them, according to social report. So this is not a West Plains issue, including city water.
Hi, my name is Janice Radmer, and I live at 24329 West Fancher Road, and I am the president of the Medical Lake Cemetery Association, and I'd like to have you get to know me, as you know this fellow. Do I know anything about cemetery running? When I first got involved with this, I went to funerals. That was my only thing, but in the early 80s, I helped the Espanola Grange pick up 2 truckloads of garbage out of the cemetery, and then I was asked to serve on a committee. This committee formed the Medical Lake Association. I helped write rules. I helped write articles of incorporation, and I had help from other cemeteries to form this. Where does most of my business come from? It comes from the 300 residents that live nearby. About 85% of the sales that I made last year came from the residents directly in that area. And I want to speak for the dead there. I represent the dead. I want to make their, how many funerals have you been to that it's always said, rest in peace? Rest in peace. That's what it means. I want rest in peace for my people out there. I feel very strongly. You bring up a name, I keep the records. You bring up a name, I usually recognize it. We have 1,500 or more graves out there, but I usually know where everyone is. I mow, I pick up trash, I do everything. I do the records, I do the sales, and I'm very proud of that. And I'm very proud that I contribute to the areas and I contribute to the community.
how many gun shooters out there are gonna contribute to the community? You can sit out on 902 and watch 250 cars go from Eastern State Hospital into Spokane. They are not contributing to the community. These folks are. They send their kids to school there. They go into Medical Lake and buy supplies. They contribute to the community. And I'm hoping that you'll talk to me and get to know me as you know this young man. Because I've worked really hard to keep this going for many, many years. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yep. I get to make that decision. I'm a lawyer here.
Sure. Close this, or not close this, we at least may say we're moving on to the gun close discussion. This is not it.
No,
That's about someone else.
yes. And I can wait until. That's, yes.
Well, I don't think we're gonna have a good point. It's just a workshop. Prefer to just keep moving in this direction if you don't mind. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, okay. Hello, I'm Suzanne Sabal. Good morning, Commissioner and Chair, Mr. Poole. I was here 2 weeks ago for, I did a public comment and I produced a letter, submitted a letter. I'm here today to continue to encourage the Planning Commission as the land capacity analysis work is being completed in June through September to make a zoning comprehensive plan map change. The change would be from low residential to rural traditional zoning on the plots of land north of Francis and south of Bigelow. So that's the area where it's Orchard Prairie School District, and I'm on a 5-acre plot requesting to be able to have that subdivided to build a home back there. It would benefit not only me, but many people in the area that are looking to purchase land in that beautiful area, because right now it can only be subdivided into 20 acres. So my request is to change it from low residential to rural traditional. I've done work in my letter about the septic is the sewer would be available and water from Pasadena Park would be available. And I know this is a big process, so it's just one person requesting that amount. It's not a lot of money because I'm probably that other businesses have had that happen with having it on less than 10 acres.
You spoke before, but I think
Yes.
the reminder was to address these to staff to as you go through the process. But your comments are submitted.
Okay, I appreciate it. I just thought I would just kind of keep in everybody's.
Maybe if you just have to rally, make it come up last time if you made it this time. But thank you so much.
Well, thank you for your time and your work.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
If you want to follow up.
Yes, when we get to our staff report. It's actually a very good segue.
I want to go ahead, Russ.
I just got one quick extra comment that we also have the.
You need to talk about this.
Not good at this, is that we also have the waste management hazardous material dump out there. It's also contributing also, and it's a sandy soil, so things.
Thank you.
Patty has her hand raised.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah, we,
Can you hear me? Oh, sorry.
Can you hold for 1 second? We'll get right to you.
Patty, want to talk about the gun club?
Yeah, I think so.
Patty, go ahead.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay, thank you. This is Patricia Appergen, West 22102 Thorpe Road, with property owner of a couple of adjacent parcels. Anyways, to the staff, I've been reviewing the proposed amendment and have a few questions, and that is the proposed text amendment includes things in there that I think are factually incorrect. Under purpose in section 1, it says, it is customary for gun and archery ranges to hold multi-day target shooting skills competitions. That is factually incorrect. As from what I submitted last week, it is not customary for gun ranges to do that. It is customary for them to have target practice. And then it turns around and says to facilitate these cultural activities, we need all these accessory uses, which is not evident in most of the gun ranges that were submitted as evidence of why this needed to be changed. Okay. Let me see, I've got to look at this. Can you also have your staff research how many ranges in Washington State have the words skills competition or anything that infers competitive activity inside of their codes? Because I'm looking at this and I'm kind of questioning whether the staff has even looked at it. And, is it written by the staff or was it submitted just directly by SGC? And obviously it looks like as though it was submitted by SGC because it just looks like it's a custom fit for what they want in the rural traditional area of Spokane County. Most people don't understand. I think I'm beginning to understand that what I'm hearing is that it appears a gun range can only fit in the rural traditional if you're limited by large ag land, but there's a lot of other land out there and there is forest, and we've seen other counties put these things in other areas. And I think we need to be more flexible than saying that we're going to shoehorn this into rural traditional areas. There was a commissioner that mentioned something about not having places for their grandson to learn to shoot. And I want to assure him that there are plenty of areas for interior ranges and exterior ranges in Spokane County to shoot. It's not like as though we need another gun club, although we want to find a home for them. I know they were pushed out of the Valley location, and I'm a little concerned about, the continued comments from the club that the county promised them a soft place to land. The fact was they lost a lot of that when they got their $8 million from the school district. And now they have to become compatible with an area. People have to look at that. And the gun club from the beginning of this in 2019 have never, ever given an inch on being compatible. And that's what has really struck all of us to show up. The last thing I want to do is have all of you introduced to my mother, who is sitting 91 years old in the back of your meeting room, who leafleted her community to let them know this was happening because no one else was going to, and has been working furiously on this, sending out letters. And if you want to know where all this starts, it starts with that grand little lady who's lived out in that neighborhood for 50 years. Thank you.
They both spoke, but they still have their hands raised.
Please, take them down.
I think so.
Yeah, they're spoken up.
Mhm.
Okay.
Recently, there's some irony in this, but recently, the planning department came to us with a proposed solution to a very challenging problem. In its efforts to comply with the Growth Management Act, the county apparently approved a residential addition on 5 Mile, on the edge of 5 Mile, that somehow fell through the cracks. And they solved that problem by, of all things, taking a cemetery out of the Growth Management Act. That's just coincidence, but thousands of people in Spokane County shoot. We found a place for marijuana to be grown. We found a way to solve the GMA lodge. We figured out how to deal with materials. I just say, I think we need to figure out how we can provide an opportunity for this big a population use what it's always done. It's not gonna be easy, it's not gonna be pleasant, it's gonna take some work and some give and take. And they say that, and I never really understood that till I got, they say that legislation is like making sausage. And it is a bit like making sausage, it's compromising. I appreciate, immensely, I never thought about rest in peace. I thought, my gosh, if you can't shoot where airplanes are making a ton of noise and people are deceased, that's a pretty good spot. But there are a lot of things for us to consider. And I think the public has to figure out how we can do that. And it's not gonna make everybody happy, but we've got to figure out how we can live with the things that go on in our community.
I appreciate public comment.
Do a quick follow up here, Paul.
Yeah, I just have a comment to the gentleman that said that this is all about Middle Creek Cemetery. What brought us here, sir, and gentlemen and ladies, is the fact that this gun club came out to our area and created this issue. Our concerns are not only with the Middle Creek Cemetery, our issues are with this whole county. So I want to clarify that we're not just we're talking about our cemetery, yes, but our comments also apply to everybody in every school, park, cemetery, whatever. So I want you to consider that, not just what we're saying about the medical cemetery, but everybody in this Spokane County is going to be concerned with this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if we're ready to move on, I would also, or I would comment that we record these comments, we take notes, we will take the citizens and residents' comments and concerns into consideration, and bring that back to you with some responses to those at a next meeting, which at the moment we don't know quite when that will be, because we are waiting on the gun club to be ready to come back and prepare. To be clear, though, on one point that was made, the Spokane County planning staff is not a proponent. We are not an advocate for the gun club. We are reacting to a request from the gun club, much as we react to requests from property owners that want to propose comprehensive plan amendments. We are looking at, our job is to look at what is in the public interest and bring you those recommendations. I want to be clear, we are not doing this on behalf of the gun club, except in their request. We are not their advocates.
GTA.
Yes.
On
to something more interesting, perhaps, or differently interesting. As we introduced to you last time, we have a constituent request to expand the use of special event facilities, I guess, or temporary uses that are currently allowed in the small tract agriculture section. And notably, these are the wedding and event facilities that you see in the Green Bluff area. Is the best analogy. The request is to expand that to the rural traditional zone. And that, of course, would be countywide, not just as any other zoning text amendment would be. And we are, we're gathering comments and testimony as to the public interest in doing so. As we shared last time, presumably we would at least, start with the same criteria in the zoning code that are listed for temporary uses now, which are seasonal uses, hourly uses, noise, traffic, and others. We heard a number of those comments last time, and we're incorporating that into a proposal that we will bring forward, but we also want to leave it on your agenda for any further discussion today, or if some public comment was forthcoming. So with that, we would listen to any comments that may be available.
Morning. I'm Trish Eason, live at 8824 South Hillby Road.
I'm also the business owner and property owner of Barn and Blossom Nursery. It's located at 4010 East Jameson Road on the corner of the Palouse Highway in Jameson. The nursery's been there for 20 plus years. My husband and I bought it December of 2019. And what we loved about the property is it's majestic, it's beautiful. And buying a property, starting a business at the beginning of COVID really got us to understand the importance of community events and a space that community could come to and just be a part of the beautiful nature that the nursery is. We spent the last 4 years building a deck, buildings that can accommodate community events and extend our nursery season. So Spokane, Washington, our nursery season is all of 6 months at best. Then you're dealing with weather, and to financially afford to continue to expand and stay in business, you have to have other things available to you to produce income. A lot of our growth has also been from the desire of our neighbors. We have extreme support from all the neighbors around that attend our food truck events that we've had, movie night on the barn with their families. And like I said, COVID really did, we created that place of respite for people that they could come to and be a part of something in this beautiful outdoor arena. We've had many requests for weddings. There's nothing on the upper South Hill side off the Palouse to do that. As a commercial business, we have 70 parking spots. We have 2 ADA compliant restrooms. We have commercial liability insurance, and all of the things to make it a safe place for these type of events. We're just restricted because of the current zoning. So it would be great if we could get conditional use to do that in the rural traditional zone. Okay, thank you so much.
You did have a blind page, did you think so? Like, but when would you things like that? You probably got more formal.
Yeah, I mean, all of it, quite honestly. We have had wine tasting events with winery out of Prosser, and Winescape has approached us to do a collaboration to.
So why is wine tasting events okay, but the wedding is not? Maybe that's the question.
It may be that these are unknown events. Our code compliance effort, we only respond to complaints. We don't go looking for violations.
Adam Howard, who is wine tasting, he built that barn just for that.
Exactly.
And in that case, when we get, for example, a special event license that comes from the state, we have to sign off on whether it's appropriate for the zone. Wine tasting, beer licenses for special events at these areas in ag zones are generally approved because the product is an agricultural product. You know, and we don't go so far as to say it has to be made on site to be consumed, which is part of the Greenbluff side. But that's why wine tastings, if they apply for a state-supplied liquor license, would be allowed by our department because it's generally an ag product that's being consumed.
So that was the cat out of the bag. I should have said that.
That's okay. Thank you. Yeah, and it really is how to extend, just some of these things are natural uses with a nursery. I mean, look across the street, the whole state, any nursery that's on property, we have to maintain beautiful gardens. We have to, our property is, we have to show our product in a way that people want to enjoy it as many ways as they can. So it's just an extension of our business, quite honestly.
You celebrate.
We do. And hops, yes. Thank you.
I have to be honest with you, I do understand your request. way back when, and I don't know when it was, I was on the planning commission, and we had an area called Green Bluff that was exactly standing where you're at. And that was a point of conversation, and I came back and I said, well, there was also a spot on the South Hill. Can we change the complete, to fit Spokane in these growth areas, because they're not competing with each other, but there's no one representing your particular location now or then. And so it's just pretty much so given for Green Bluff, and we just listened to the transportation, here's a spot that's even a little bit closer, but we're not gonna be competing with Green Bluff. It's a point of expanding close by entertainment, and it's been a great family and the nursery kind of a setting. And so I often wonder why we didn't do it back then. I'm saying we need to move forward and look at it very strongly as a recommendation. And that was my only thought. I'm just reminiscing.
Thank you. And it really is in that area. We do have, I mean, our first day we opened April 12th, we had customers and neighbors bring us cookies and notes saying, oh my gosh, we're so glad the 6 months that you were closed was a hard time. And I mean, we've looked at doing, winter market where we have vendors that can come out in indoor space that's heated and insulated. Farmers that can set up farm stands. We're part of the South Spokane Farm Corridor. We host the Tour de Farms event that is a cycling event around the Palouse, connecting all of the farms out there. It just is the optimal space for community and not competing with Green Bluff's an hour away. It's a completely different space, but we are set up, we have parking, we've considered our neighbors are saying, do whatever to stay open and continue to make this a place that they can all enjoy. So it's not an issue with our neighbors not wanting this. It's an issue because a Green Bluff facility found out that we were doing this and complained. So it really got brought to light that there should be some amendments and something more on the south side of. Thank you.
I want to commend you. I've been in this business for 30 years, your business. Yeah. And it's an awful place where you're sitting right now. If you book something ahead and somebody files a complaint, you're between a rock and a hard place. And the experiences that venues like yours and Green Bluff provide our citizens they're priceless. They're just absolutely priceless. And so I'm supporting what you're saying.
Thank you. Well, come on out and see it. It's beautiful.
Mr. Chair. The conundrum we have is one of our predecessors making, and that's that we tied a specific use to a zoning district. Should a wedding facility, what is the actual relationship between a wedding or event facility and a farm, other than a nice piece of land? But that could be in any zoning district, it could be anywhere. As this moves forward, we're into the beginnings of the 2026 plan. That comes with the side benefit or side work, as my staff will find out, of updating the development regs at the same time. We intend to pursue a radically different approach to zoning than what we have now, because what we have now is outdated. It's been outdated for 20 years. It dates to the 1913s in Cleveland and New York. But the idea that these events are tied to a zone makes no sense. And so I would anticipate that in the 26 version, you're going to see separations. So for example, these would no longer be required to be in a small tract ag as a temporary use. They would be a use that could be permitted as a temporary use, or it could be permitted as a conditional use in multiple areas. And those conditions would be, as the speaker said, to protect neighboring landowners too from noise and traffic and distractions and nuisances. But it would allow the idea of, particularly in our rural areas, the idea of expanding agritourism, expanding the viability of our farms in a way that doesn't force them to take one paycheck a year when they bring their crops to market. And so this is if you think of it in our traditional zone, it's a slippery slope because there's a lot of rural traditional land in the county, relatively little STA, and it's only in 2 major areas. So this will be a county-wide issue. Whereas if you take it away from that and say, let's take each of these on their own merits, we could put them wherever they make sense. And so we as staff are enthusiastic about pursuing this, even though the traditional approach right now of a zoning text amendment is a little more challenging.
I'd like to point out that the location of this particular spot that we're talking about, and being specific, is within 3/8 of a mile of 2 church facilities, and they're in the middle of it. So again, and we're on a major highway, or I should say a major thoroughfare, Lewis Highway. So we have a lot of things that we say, oh, that kind of makes sense, or do they want a church there? It's the name, quote, that we're hanging it on, and that's what I'm trying to point out, is that it kind of makes sense. Is this too logical? Is it always? Logan's not. Jesus turned water into wine.
I know. I would be remiss not to bring up a few points. I mean, kudos for flying under the radar and essentially an illegally used. I can see your point in trying to make the land productive and make a living. I don't see that some of these requirements that are in the small tract agricultural weddings, special events, which is part of the code. I'm not sure on the enforcement of it. I mean, it says you got to retain the agriculture use as primary. Who determines that? Is it like how much did you make on your product per year versus how much you made on holding beds? I have had the privilege or the pain, whatever you want to look at it as being in rural areas where events became quite a hot topic with a lot of contention, where people were carrying guns in Teton County. And when I moved back to Spokane and Greenbluff was going through this, I was like, oh my gosh, what's happening to my community? But the reason that they are contentious is because what are the numbers of events? Is it going to be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, or is it going to be 3 separate events, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 200 guests? What is the transportation network? What can it handle? How does that impact people on Lewis Highway trying to get in and out of doing their regular daily activities? It's not a church. Churches are protected in a very special way in this country. So, and in all of our state codes and zoning and all of that. So, I mean, it's just going to be a little bit complex to deal with. I agree that there are lots of places that are probably work for that type of business. And I've been to some very beautiful events in beautiful places like that. I just think that it needs to be approached pretty carefully, especially when you're looking at, this will be countywide. Yes, you moved in here 50 years ago, but change comes along with everything. Will get very uncomfortable. So lots of unintended consequence pitfalls out there.
We agree completely. Go ahead, Lon.
I definitely agree with Melissa. And but on the other hand, you're not the only one out there that's running a lot of these wedding venues properly. There's a lot of them. I live on the corner of Stone and Bruce, and you take Bruce to go up to Greenbluff. I've got a particular neighbor, he's a great guy, he does masonry for a living, but you drive by his place and he's got a couple $1 million invested into his wedding venue. And he is definitely not on the up and up, but there are hundreds of cars parked there, and this is something that we have to need to look at because people are, the times are changing, and you need to look at making this stuff.
Let me hear one more question. Just give something to say.
Yeah. So I actually haven't hosted a wedding at my venue yet. Pardon?
You want.
I would like to, and I would like to do it properly. The limit of my size would be 150 people, which all of my parking spots would accommodate that. We would shut down, noise turned off at 9, everyone off the property at 10. The events that I have had, every single one of my neighbors has attended and continue to attend. So it is creating this, I mean, I agree, you having a blanket and just having it willy-nilly where anyone in that specific zoning can do it is not the proper way to do it. I don't have the opportunity to even do it because of the zoning restrictions. And the majority of my property, the majority of my business is always going to be a nursery. And until you've worked a nursery business, you're up against increasing cost. My property taxes have doubled. I'm limited to at the most a 6-month season. And how do we create the infrastructure that I've built to extend it to other community things? The Perry Street Market, their winter market closed down because of weather. I have a facility that all of those vendors can be inside, do their winter market, and have it be a lovely place for community. I've also had neighbors that have offered their property as additional parking if we ever have had a community event that extends beyond the parking spots that we've built in. So for us, we're in a unique position because like I said, I mean, I could fill this room with our neighbors in support of it, because we have done it with consideration of everybody and noise. I just would love the opportunity to not have to fly under the radar. I don't like asking for forgiveness. I would like to have permission. So, thank you.
Yeah, I agree with you. When you see that happening in California, it is really important to figure out how to make it legal for people and how to regulate it so that it is done right. Yeah. And with the appropriate considerations for adjacent or even people that are just using the same roadway system and same facilities. So it's time.
That's very much the balancing act that we do. We are, when we're operating properly in county planning, we are a growth agency. We're trying to encourage growth in compatible areas and that is catalytic, that supports other growth. But we're also reflecting that we have to protect the values of what people have already invested, perhaps next door to something that's growing. So there is a balancing act on how you do this. There are uses that are truly incompatible side by side, but there are a lot of uses that are prohibited from happening because of this antiquated zoning code that we have. And so looking to update that in a way that produces more entrepreneurial spirit is very much in our horizon. And hopefully you will discuss and deliberate that with us.
Mr. Chairman, I received a phone call from an individual who does a lot of training with young ladies, especially with their horses. And they hold like 4 play day events a year. And all the parking, trucks and trailers, etc., is up getting one of their pastures. And she's very concerned about what could happen to this. And so I would relate it to you that they only have like 3 or 4 days what they call play day a year out there. Why did you have 60, 70 young ladies out there with their horses during the weekend with the play day? And I said I would pass that on to you so that you're aware that there's another segment beyond weddings that uses their property in their arena to help others. So pass that on.
Thank you. Last comment I had was that I know that.
Last comment, is that what you said?
I know, the last comment, can you believe that? I would have been done by now. Anyway, my point is saying is that we're looking forward to the big plan of the growth management for 2026, but I don't want her or other people in her same spot to just wait around. I would like to be able to help them move until we get to that particular point. There's some positive notes I want to bring about is what I'm trying to say.
Glad we share your sense of urgency, but I have to caution all of us. We all know the pace of changing government is not expeditious. But we understand exactly what you're saying, and we'll do the best.
The more relation comes to mind, but let's try that.
Okay.
Yeah. I appreciate Barnett and Lawson coming to put this in context and to put a face on it. That's exactly what's happening here. So we will be as expeditious as possible. Get the work started. Anything else?
So let's get the method out here.
Okay. Jeff Ford?
Yes. Once I have my able-bodied colleague here, we have a staff report for you today. We've kind of amplified our time before because we've only run out of time. But what we want to run through is a little bit of where the comp plan is. And this will address some of the questions we've seen or heard today from members of our audience. And notably,
Here. That's because there's two screens. There it is.
Okay.
Try now.
Quick overview, mostly for our audience. The commission has been through a lot of this. The basics of the GMA, the coordination that we are really emphasizing with cities and towns in this 26 update that at least wasn't done in my version of this in 2011, 2012. And then the urban growth areas, which fall under your review, the steering committee of elected officials review, and ultimately the board of county commissioners. So that's where all of that's headed. A couple of quick things. The distinction between our plan and our development rates is substantial. The plan is a guide. It is a statement of policy, it is a statement of vision, a statement of goals and objectives, whereas the development regulations are law. They are what controls development and how development is permitted. And importantly for our designation, the Growth Management Act designates counties as the regional government. What that means essentially is all of these cities and towns' comprehensive plans must be in conformance with the county comprehensive plan. As long as we're planning jointly, that will happen by default. But it's a statement that as disagreements go, if something is fundamental and serious, the county board does have the final authority. This is what planning looks like in Washington. So if someone was speaking about sausage making, this is it. There are state laws that govern us, the Growth Management Act, the Shoreline Management Act chiefly, our countywide planning policies. We don't yet have multi-county policies. However, as part of our vision, we are going to be talking and started talking to our surrounding counties here in Eastern Washington. One of those is sort of the obvious, the travel shed. We get a lot of people driving in from those counties into jobs in Spokane County. So we have some connection to our rural neighbors, but we're also trying to explore whether we can create a planning relationship with Kootenai County, which is obviously part of our metro area. And it's something we're inextricably linked with, but because there are different state laws, it makes that more of a legal challenge, but we're trying to pursue that. But you can see the other parts of this. The community vision being our driving part of it, and then things that come out of the comprehensive plan, which our capital decisions, our permitting system, and then everything else that kind of falls out of the sausage. These next three slides are the goals from the Growth Management Act, and they're fairly broad. A lot of them have not changed since the beginning, and so some of them even sound. Some of them are simply not very specific. Number two, reduce sprawl. Okay, but do we have guidance to do that? Well, we do in different ways. And one of the challenges we have with GMA is that because it's now coming up in its middle age, it's been added to like a house and remodeled over time. And so some of these pieces are now actually contradictory or inconsistent with the others. One of the things that we hope to do in our own plan is to look for some of those contradictions and try to create a legislative agenda that, along with other counties, we can put in front of the state legislature in the next few years and say, here's some ways of streamlining or bringing parts of GMA up to date. But you can see the first 5, the next bunch, permitting, natural resources, citizen participation. We talked about the public participation program. You'll see that coming back in May. And then number 14 is the newest one. It's adopted in the Climate Act that Jamie referred to, Bill 1181. It now creates a climate and resiliency element in the comprehensive plan that we must address. We are starting that work, and importantly, I think, we offered to partner with all of these small towns, took us up on that. And so we have a consortium of, I think, 10 communities, leaving out the bigger ones, Spokane Valley, Liberty Lake, Airway Heights, but pretty much everybody else is in one team. So we'll be working with a single consultant. We will be working on behalf of those small towns. We did that first off, because if you're talking about climate and resiliency, it doesn't stop at the municipal boundary. And so our responsibility as the county it transcends those boundaries, we thought. And secondly, is the practical logistical side. These smaller places don't have professional staff to do this. They can't always afford to hire consultants. And so if we pool that resource, the county can play a role and help them. So this is what our plan looks like in its layering. We'll be producing all of these elements that you see on the left. And importantly, I want to talk about a couple of them today, housing, because the housing element, again, changed from the legislature a year ago. It is now asking or requiring counties and cities of certain size to allocate housing for growth based on income levels. You've heard us talk about area median income. That's the kind of federal benchmark that's used for census funding decisions that are generally called AMI. There's categories now below 30% AMI, 30 to 50% AMI, 80 or 50 to 80, 80 to 120, and then above 120. The county and their colleagues in PTAC, Professional Technical Advisory Committee that works with the steering committee, is going through the allocation of how do we take the 100,000 people that are expected to grow into the county, allocate that by income, and then allocate that by geography. And the law says each community must take its fair share of all of these, each of these income levels, these 5 income levels. If you consider a market-based economy, that's impractical to the point of being totally unrealistic. But if you look at the regulatory system, the fair share argument, those of you that have enough white hair will remember this from the 70s. That was the argument back in the urban renewal days, fair share housing. It's got a huge negative connotation to those of us that remember that, because that led to things like Cabrini Green and Robert Taylor Homes in Chicago and Pruitt-Igoe in St. Louis, that were these horrible places that were intended to be, public housing for people that couldn't afford it. This we have to consider in a different context, but the market has already defined where our areas have built. And so the idea of PTAC and the steering committee working their way through this is a novel prospect. It will probably take some iterations to work its way through. But that's going to be one of the changes we have in this goal. So here's where we are. We've sort of provided that initial inventory. We're drafting policies now. We've got a first draft of what those allocations look like. That's based on a formula or a methodology that the Department of Commerce produced, and they've got really 3 versions of it, an A, B, C version. Right now, the steering committee or the PTAC is agreeing to use the A version as a hypothesis. In other words, we need to start somewhere. So what does that look like for these allocations? Very likely, as we do the math and then the geography, we'll make adjustments on that, and we'll end up with a more unique distribution that fits Spokane County rather than a statewide model. But anyway, we'll have an updated chapter on that. That will be a challenge. And then the other one, which is brand new, climate resiliency, has two major elements. One is greenhouse gas emissions, reducing those, and the other is the resiliency element, which if you don't think of an easy definition, you can kind of think of the Elk and Oregon fires, the Gray Fire. Resiliency is a term, or in a planning sense, is how do you provide for unanticipated natural disasters, unanticipated economic disasters, cultural, climate things ahead of time. And so it makes all sorts of sense, but it's also going to be very, very difficult to quantify and bring to fruition for recommendations. And importantly, remember, back to that early slide, we can have goals and policies, but we have to have development regs to implement them. So turning this into law is going to be a statement of policy that will go through you and the board to ultimately say, this is how we're going to promote into our future. So this comes from the planning goals out of the RCWs. And then here's where we are. One important part of this is, for the first time, the legislature last session provided funding to places, counties and cities for our comprehensive plan update. In the past, it was you must update every 7 years and you're on your own to do it. Now the city, or the county, the state has provided funding for this next round of major updates. And so we have a funding source that is independent of our general fund, which is very useful, of course. And then for the climate resiliency element, a separate funding allocation was made by the legislature. And so we have sufficient funds to do this in an important way. Third element of that is Commerce itself is hired a consultant to do an 11 county study on the greenhouse gas emissions portion of this. And the 11 counties are simply the 11 biggest counties that are most likely to produce greenhouse gas emissions. And Commerce is paying for that consultant directly. So that also takes some of the financial burden off of Spokane County to consider that for Eastern Washington. But this will be a whole new component to what we're working with. So, here we are. Here's our world, our urban growth areas in the metro core. Here are our requirements. Started those public participation guidelines, the countywide planning policies were reviewed by you and updated by the board in 22. We've got the public participation program, which is a huge element, even though it's not land use, it's not housing, it's not transportation, but it is how everybody in this room has a voice in this comprehensive plan, updating how the county is going to grow. And one of our biggest priorities is understanding and protecting our rural communities. And that's not just preserving ag opportunities, but it's the rural lifestyle. So, where does a shooting range go? Where do wedding venues go? How does that fit into the rural communities that we got? That is our responsibility. That's very different than city planning. So it's a balancing act that we take very, very seriously. This is the fun part of comprehensive plan. One of the things, and that's why we're starting it today. One of the things that we'll be doing is, I should say, there's kind of a two-part process. We are building what I call a GMA box. All of the required elements, we're addressing those individually, and then we'll be addressing them as they synthesize together, because initially they may have some maybe contradictory elements. But we'll have that GMA box that will keep us compliant with the Growth Management Act. On top of that, though, is the quality of life aspect. How do we want Spokane County to grow? And so, today we heard about wedding venues. Right now they're tied to a zone, they're tied to a regulation that it's there because it was convenient, I guess, at the time to do that. Well, we should be thinking about that in a different way. We should be thinking about our growth on our edges beyond one subdivision after another, and think about the fact that what we're really doing, what we should be doing, is building neighborhoods instead of just plotting and platting land. We should be looking for combined uses, if not mixed uses. We have, as we've at least hinted, Under the Growth Management Act, we have the LAMRs, the local areas of more intense rural development. And the LAMRs were created to recognize these small rural settlements that were not connected to any metro area, but really weren't technically rural in their sense. The condition in GMA, though, is that they can't grow, they can't expand, they can't get any better. And speaking personally, I think that's absurd and preposterous, because if you go back to, for example, that new element in climate, if we're going to reduce greenhouse gases, if we're going to reduce vehicle miles traveled and have resiliency, why wouldn't we strengthen these small places and try to provide economics that would work? So maybe a market, or even an expanded C-store could go into these places so that someone doesn't have to drive 20 miles downtown to Rosauers to buy milk once a week, and they could take that trip off the road. So we want to take a serious look at least 2 or 3 of what's now called the LAMRs in the county, and try to recognize that we should, and this is our legislative agenda, because we have to change the GMA to do this, but we should be able to make a good argument for why that GMA should be changed. So this is also part of our discussion, and we're looking for ideas today. And one of the ways we propose to carry this conversation out to the community is through a scenario building. And essentially that means not simply going out and saying, what do you want? What's your wish list? Is here's some ideas of how we could grow. And it could be this kind of LAMRT scenario. It could be a compact urban form. It could be a variety of these based on the places, based on the assets that are out there. But looking at how that happens is a fairly standard way of planning for larger areas, but it is, at least in my research, it's never been done for Spokane County. So it'll be a new approach for us to be taking a look at this. And then we throw out some ideas that we talked about, these extra urban areas, like what you see on the lower right is the North Mead area. That's technically a LAMRT under our current zoning, under our current plan, but it has urban zoning. It fell into that odd spot in between GMA. But we need to recognize that that's an urbanizing area and treat it accordingly. So we're looking at those as other LAMRTs, and then the idea is we have to work with our cities, have a brutal, honest conversation, because annexation law, at least right now, is a big reason why these cities don't annex lands that are in the urban growth areas. Under ideal circumstances, the county would not be administering urban densities and growth. It would be planned and implemented and then annexed, or it would annex it into a nearby community. Doesn't happen here, as many of you know. So we have to be prepared for the fact that we are going to be like a city and may have to administer town-like environments forever, as well as rural and ag and industrial. So we'll reflect that in all of our scenario building.
I have a question. And I've struggled with this ever since the city passed Spokane. I'm leaving next Friday to go to Berkeley. And if you haven't been to Berkeley was built out, I'm guessing, in the 30s and the 40s. And the density is about 35 units per acre, and there's nothing over 2 stories tall. And I look at that, and my question is, how do you get from where we are to there? I'm now getting some feedback from some builders that I'm talking to that are seeing how they can go into infill and acquire an individual parcel. But how do we take the state legislation and the city legislation, and how do we teach builders what the opportunities are so they want to pursue them? I'm doing a lot of Googling, and I haven't found any decent roadmap of how I get from here to there. So I would challenge you guys to help us do that, because if we can't get the builders to utilize the form-based housing that we're trying to get to, it's going to be a long haul.
If it was easy, it wouldn't be any fun.
I know.
We are we are going to be proposing at least a model for a hypothesis to start, and it's going to be called a transect. And what that does is it looks at a range of densities from a downtown urban core out to rural pasture, and it looks at almost like a continuum. And we're using that as a starting point because it doesn't have to be, ground zero at Sprague and Division, and all the densities decline from that going out in a uniform sense. You could have these in different places, so that North Mead area may be a place that we encourage more density in that center of it because it becomes a separate place, even though it doesn't have to. And helping Cheney grow, helping Medical Lake grow, helping Airway Fates grow, which is so totally boundary.
Real challenging issues in how you entitle encourage to get that to happen.
It is. And
their minds and mine have looked at it, but I'm just.
Well, and we have both the opportunity and the challenge to look at the full spectrum. Because if you're in the city and the transect is this long, the city is only looking at this part of it. It goes from downtown to still urban density. But we've got this whole other part that's our responsibility to look at. So we will be opening up that conversation with you. A couple more things. This is a scatter map of single-family and multifamily permits for about 15 years. All of the communities report this to SRTC. They use it for traffic modeling, but it's also interesting to put up as a graphic. And what you can see pretty clearly is the concentration of growth has been in the areas that the county is responsible for. It's in those urban growth areas. Fairly widely dispersed in the cities, but these, the 5 Mile Prairie area, the North Windermere area, West Plains, the Moran Prairie on the south, the valley on the other side, the growth of Liberty Lake itself, and even on the north side, Argonne Road moving up toward Bigelow Gulch. So that's where the action has happened. There's no reason to think that pattern is going to change. So how do we manage that? So we create quality places. We create a quality of life in those places, and not just a place where you have to get in your car to do everything. Here is our working projection. You have seen this before, but it's a good reminder of what we're impacting. The county board has adopted, for planning purposes, the orange dashed line, or the mid-range estimate from the State Office of Financial Management. That shows that by 2046, we will have about 650,000 people in Spokane County. That's roughly 100,000 more than we have now. Frankly, I think that's a low estimate, but it's also a good planning estimate because that's a defendable number. And we can work on that as we move forward. Here's that first allocation of population. This is a draft. This will be in front of the steering committee of elected officials at their May 15th meeting. And what you can see is, I guess notably, and that second to the last column, or the second one in from the right, is the change of population over the planning horizon. And the unincorporated UGA area, 30,000, is projected again to be the largest population growth of any of the places in the county. The city being second, and the city of the valley being third. But it shows under this allocation that our responsibility is going to be to accommodate more population than any of our cities and towns. It does show 0 for a lot of the small towns. We're going to be working with them. Back to that whole GMA argument of reduced miles traveled. If we could make Latah and Rockford and Spangle more vibrant and provide some economic energy for them, we all learned during COVID that you can work perfectly fine from Spangle and be employed by San Francisco or be employed in Berkeley. You don't have to be there anymore to do that. And so people that would choose a rural lifestyle, choose a place to live, we want to provide that option for our small towns. We want to be, in a sense, we look at our comprehensive plan as both a guiding document, but also a marketing, an economic development document. Here, look at Spokane County. This is a cool place to go. So we want to help everybody in their grow. Here's where we get to, or will get to, one of our biggest challenges. This slide shows roughly 2,300 acres of land that is in an urban growth area today, but is still carrying a rural zoning classification. That shouldn't happen by GMA. We understand how it did. These were from the original GMA designations, where somebody had to take a best guess at a map and say, now Medical Lake needs to grow. Let's give them a UGA out here. Most of them have not grown anywhere near into these areas over that 20 or 40 year period. And so all of this 2,300 acres has to be accounted for in our 100,000 growth before we can expand the boundary beyond where it is now. What that means is these acreages are going to move. So Cheney has a whole bunch of acreage that they're not going to ever be able to grow and build on. That acreage is maybe going to end up attached to the city of the valley. Medical Lake has to, their urban growth areas on their north side. It's also under the Fairchild Jalos County. So, you know, it's a double whammy. They can't use it even if they wanted to. We need to move that over on their east side so they have a chance to grow out in a way that makes sense. So it's going to be a very exciting process, but the steering committee is going to have to get used to the idea that it's not mine, it's not yours. It's how do we make this thing happen in a way that makes sense? Yep.
We've discussed this somewhat, but the city has the water services rights to the obvious places that we're going to grow. And if the city doesn't,
sure.
How do we address the fact that the city limits are surrounded by the land, all the infrastructure is in place for, and they have the water right to, but
well, the naive, optimistic answer is we're going to plan that together, and we will come up with a set of rules that turns the city from being a last stop regulator on a comp plan amendment into a willing water provider for growth areas. Like I said, it may be naive, but we're going to open that conversation. We're doing it through traditional communication on joint planning with my counterpart Spencer and Steve McDonald. We're also doing that through updating the coordinated water system plan, which hasn't been touched since 1991. That is where we keep our inventory of who has paper water, who's got wet water, who's got the pipes, how do you deliver, how many taps do you have? And we're going to use that tool to talk about growth in water service areas. As you've seen in our comp plan areas on our northeast side, we had a situation one year where the water provider was not able to provide taps at the start of the process and had to reallocate their water from irrigation water to domestic water through the Department of Ecology before they could serve these new areas. So water is not an unlimited resource. People in the central part of the city really think it is. And the city of Spokane, to their enormous credit, acquired sufficient water rights over the years to be completely self-sufficient to serve. If they doubled in population, they'd have excess water. But that doesn't mean they can afford it. If they're going to be a regional partner, if they're going to be a cooperative joint player, they have to bring that to the table. So we will have that conversation. Here's a quick analysis from a year ago on residential land in the metro urban growth areas, on what's available. And once you look, and this is the truly back of the napkin, it looks more precise than it should be. It was done by a GIS analysis, looking at vacant parcels, adding up that acreage. And then that unbuildable column was the 25% is simply a recognition that you're going to use 25% of the land for infrastructure, period. So take that right off the top. But other parts are critical areas, unbuildable lands. So you end up with about 1,200, about 1,300 acres available in our metro urban growth area. And at our current densities, that would support, at best, 18,000 people. Well, we're going to grow by 100,000. That means this is probably insufficient, which goes back to that other slide. Okay, we have to figure out how to use this 2,300 acres. Is that all going to be sufficient, or do we need to go beyond that as well? So that's part of the math and geography exercise that we'll be doing. So, a couple last things. These are, oh, I'm not sure.
So in the business lands, are the conservation easements are those accounted for at all? I mean, those should not be on the table, right?
If they are currently vacant, they would be accounted for in here. We didn't, in this analysis, we didn't go into that level of detail. We just looked at the map. What we're doing now, though, in the land capacity analysis that you'll see very quickly is, yeah, we're going through parcel by parcel. Does it have conservation easements as a part of the program? And in which case, even though it's vacant, it's now unbuildable. We're doing that analysis now. This was done just as a quick experiment a couple of years ago.
Can you tell me what conservation easement is?
Certainly, it's a tool by which, think of it this way, it's a tool by which you've sold the development rights, or you've given the development rights of a piece of land away to keep it in open space forever.
That property tax. I mean, that's happened too. And I just wanted to follow over quickly on your assessment of the city's water rights and kind of bring it to the table, and I really agree with that. I really look forward to that. Good. The other side of that, or implied within that, is pipe and pavement is expensive, and so where the county decides to put road needs to make financial sense.
If you recall the sausage slide,
Yes.
The first thing that came out on the left side was capital facilities planning. Spokane County really did not link capital facilities with the comp plan before. It was one of the reasons we were challenged by FutureWise and others. It's one of the reasons, but one of the things we've had to work through in the settlement accomplished. And you know, or your predecessors here, we went through many meetings bringing the concrete or the CFP band-aids to this group to get that into compliance. Well, now in 23, we did it the right way. And all of those departments know that their projects have to be in the comprehensive plan and they have to be supported by the comprehensive plan. Otherwise, they're in the capital improvement program, and that's a separate subset of the capital facilities plan. But we can't grow into areas unless we can demonstrate that we can afford to do so.
Part of our process going to be to invite those prospective landowners that will come into UGA to provide us with the economic analysis of why they should be coming in, and not just leaving it to the planning department?
Yes, but it would be, yes, you have to produce that work, and then we will check. They will provide the initial assessment, but we will verify. We will check the work. Yeah.
That's part of our public process.
And that's typical for new development. You know, developers generally pay for the infrastructure, they pay for the roads, and they dedicate them to the county or the city. But the ongoing capital facility cost is, you know, can we afford to maintain? Can we afford to do these things? So we'll be doing that kind of analysis in all of these urban growth areas, using a consultant that we've talked to already that produces a map of the value. Is in one sense is sort of interesting but obvious. The value per acre of downtown land with a 20-story building on it is much different than the value of, if that same building is a big box store out here, but it's one story and it's spread out over 5 acres. That may produce a lot of sales, but the tax difference and the value difference is significant. So we'll be looking at quite a lot of detail on what kind of development fits into this. So this again is based on GIS and assessors data. These are the available vacant lands in the metro county. And importantly, you can see quite a lot still in and adjacent to the urban growth areas, which suggests that on this next map, the shaded areas, the hatched areas are the UGAs. The shaded areas are those zoned urban reserve. Urban reserve was created by our predecessors, and then is the anticipation of where the county would grow after the current plan. When the 2001 plan was done, these were the areas that were targeted for growth after today after 21, 22, 23. So these are, in a sense, our first target areas to look for. That doesn't mean that's only where urban growth area will expand. It does mean that's what we would study first. Some of them, we know, for example, 5 Mile Prairie, they're not interested in more development, but yet there they are sitting in urban reserve. So we have to look at what's going on.
Income allocation needs to be applied to these areas that are being considered to be brought in. Okay. That's kind of like top developers in this. Well, I mean, building housing, but then.
Responsible, we'll do the analysis. But if they were to come in and say they want to file a plat because it's not in the UGA, then they would have to produce the detail of the CFP to demonstrate they can afford it to. But on the planning side, we will do that analysis because we don't want it, well, third-party consulting. We don't want it to come from an interested party. Neutral party. So just a couple more slides. We talked about a roadmap early on. This is more of an update of where we are today. We're starting that visioning. We're going to be starting that scenario building. And then the last one, we're going to start, we call it whiteboarding, but what are the ideas we need to start thinking about for our development regs to implement a vision? 25 is just rolling up the sleeves and working through that GMA box, working through that visioning process with our public, with you, through a whole series of interactive workshops to studios. By the end of 25, we will have substantially a draft plan put together. And then 26 is refining, talking to others about last minute issues, state and regulatory agency review. And then before you, of course, and our target date, the last Tuesday in June, June 30th, 2026, is when this will be at the Board of County Commissioners. So there's our calendar. You see here, July is a tentative LCA coming back, and we'll be discussing that briefly with the steering committee at their May meeting, and then at their July meeting, they should be providing some direction, and so that the second meeting for the Planning Commission in July will give us some ideas for you of what that looks like. So that's where we are. And happy to take any questions or any other thoughts.
Where do we find this on the website?
Under SpokaneCounty.org/BP. B3, building and planning. There's a button that says comprehensive plan. There's one other. I thought it was this one.
It was the red line.
Well, that was a slideshow like this, but it showed it. That was this. Maybe this is
More questions.
see if you or thoughts and comments too. This is kind of open, ideas, whatever you'd like to throw our way for now.
Very, very, very good. I really enjoyed it. I appreciate it. I guess I'm missing something. We had a couple people who had asked and had talked about the text amendments and so forth, that are still in the audience. Are we giving them any guidelines of what to anticipate from us, or is there any guidelines that we want to say to them in the audience?
For amendments?
Or changes, are they supposed to just come and listen? Is that it? Can we give them any least?
No. A lot of that will be driven by the public participation program. You will be asked to recommend it to May 15th, May 16th, sorry. But before then, we have 5 kickoff sessions that we have already programmed, starting with the Downtown Library, Airway Heights Library, Medical Aid, City of the Valley, one other that we'll be doing the last 2 weeks of May. And that'll be and before that, we'll be contacting groups that are individuals that have sent us an interest in being in our stakeholder or public participation group. So as we get into May, we'll be inviting those that have expressed an interest in one form or another, that here's where we're going, here are the kickoffs, here's where you find information. We will have those kickoffs. And then there is, in that PPP, there's a whole series of events of how we reach out.
It was in the zoning text one.
Oh, okay.
You in that picture?
No, but I think that's Pete and Cog over there on the.
Right here?
Yeah.
Right here?
That is the very first Spokane County Planning Commission, 1935.
Let me share this real quick.
We're working through our archive files because we're digitizing everything. And Tammy Jones, our planning manager, found that yesterday. And so I was like, oh, this is too cool. We're going to put this up tomorrow. So anyway, that's those are your predecessors, all getting together with their pencils and paper. And there's a map over there in the corner. Yeah.
Does the GMA create any leverage to make more effort at mass transit? Sure.
Leverage, maybe it's certainly part of their goals is to provide a compact urban form that includes transit. I don't know that it provides any leverage to do so. However, I don't remember if we mentioned this or not. We're starting a meeting with STA tomorrow to integrate them into our comp plan process, much like we've learned to integrate the other special districts, schools, water, fire. STA has been over here on this independent parallel track forever. They plan their routes in their own method, whether it's just extending or whether they get funding, and they do that. And as part of this housing element, transit is an integral part of those low AMI groups. We want to talk to Carl Ottestrom, their planning director, about how do we better align transit planning with comprehensive planning. They're sort of intuitively there together, but STA generally follows, the old retail follows rooftops idea. STA doesn't plan and start building routes to areas where we're going to build, where we're going to be existing. They wait for that density to happen and then they go out and get it. We want to get them a little, I don't want to speak for them, but we would ideally want them to be at that plan to say, if we're going to grow a new neighborhood out here and it's going to have an affordable housing component, just like a capital facilities plan, within 5 years, we need to have a transit station or a transit stop out here. And STA, now you need to plan for that. And if we need to help find funding, we'll help find grant funding. We need to do it as a partnership so they're not on their own. But we need to be able to say with some certainty that we're linking transit with growth.
You get down to that 25 to 50% of the household incomes. That allows you then to cut back on your parking requirement, your garage requirement, which cuts costs your house down to 20%. Makes it affordable. I mean, the two run down the road together.
Well, you're right, but it's not just transit. It's not just getting rid of a car. It's also the idea that that housing area, that neighborhood, should exist with some opportunity to walk to work or to daily process to take a bike to work in a reasonable opportunity. Midwestern cities from the 1800s all had manufacturing and housing built all over it, and then we zoned it out of existence. Well, it's time to think about part of that too. Post World War II, the boom of the suburbs, the automobile boom. But we've all been rethinking that as planners. How do we reintegrate jobs in housing, or entertainment in housing, or services of housing, so that we don't have to get in even if we have a car, we don't have to get into it every time we want to do something. Which was, frankly, it was the goal of the centers and programs in the city's comprehensive plan. It just didn't the city ultimately didn't create the tools to implement that, even though the goals and the policies were there to do exactly that, to try to bring that density and mixed use together.
As far as you know, are both sides willing to work together? Or is this a conversation or real?
I'm convinced they will work with us. I think the challenge is going to be, we will sort of upset the apple cart a little bit, because we want to talk them into thinking about their long range planning in a different way than they do now, which is totally independent. It's like, here, we have this thing. It is, and it's not to criticize, it's the model that works, because when you're creating those lines, they're typically funded out of transportation grant money that comes out of the federal highway fund. You can't tap into that money unless you can show there's a demand. And that isn't that, oh, we put a yellow dot on this map that we think is going to grow out here in 5 years, so please give us $30 million so we can start building a line out there that it happens. We have to figure out a different way to help them find that kind of funding. Got to start somewhere. Anyway, Mr. Chairman, that's all we have for you today.
The town will entertain adoption of the minutes.
Staff report for replying if you're gonna be here or not. Staff, wait. We're not done. No.
What do you have?
You remember you asked me to remind you about replying if they're gonna be present or not?
Oh, really?
Yes, I have a housekeeping item. For the benefit of our clerk and for our own blood pressure, we would like you to acknowledge that you will be able to attend meetings when she sends out a memo, so we can count RSVPs and we can be assured of a quorum, or if we're running short, we can do that. So when she sends out a confirmation, please reply. Let us know who did it.
All y'all. Well, actually, Melissa does. You sometime.
At the May 16th meeting, I will be here to start, but I have to leave no later than 10 o'clock because I have to be at the Transportation Improvement Board meeting later that afternoon. So I have to run out of town. But we'll get started. The meeting. We'll get started. You'll be ready. Okay. All right. Everyone can motion to adjourn.
Sure.
Second. Those in favor of adjournment? Aye. All opposed, say nay. We are adjourned.
Thank you.